There we go. So, it's Thursday, October 15th. I can't believe it's this far into October already. At 10 a.m. And just to repeat for the tape that you consent to have this, audio recorded.
I do consent.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks for your patience. So why don't we start? Why don't you just give me a brief sense of the work that you do, or that you've done in the recent past, and who your typical clients are, if there is such a thing. I'm not sure if anything's typical anymore, but a sense of the people you work with. Do you call them clients, or?
Depends on if they're outreach or if they're in the shelter. So we have residents and we have clients.
Okay.
Both of them would, of course, be clients as well. So either way, it's fine.
Okay, great. So if you could just give me a sense of that, and we can just start from there.
Okay, so I have worked frontline position in just outside of Toronto in Newmarket, as well as I should just say the York region area currently, and I supported clients from homeless shelters and VAW, that's Violence Against Women Shelter. At the homeless shelter, I did frontline. I also supported clients with counseling and housing supports. So in terms of identifying possible housing options for them and helping them to secure their housing. At the women's shelter, basically it was frontline support, so everything including counseling and referrals to other supports where we thought it was good for them.
Right.
Currently, I am not in York region. I am actually in Grey County, which is outside of the Toronto area.
Right. Yes, I know it, yes.
That was okay with you in terms of getting a broader expanse, since the survey or what you're doing is supposed to be looking at Canada as opposed to just the Toronto area.
Yes, that's right. But as well, this area, just outside of urban Toronto, is extremely, it's a real interest to us, because, like the suburbs, it sometimes can be ignored, in work. And so that's a real range of experience. And were you working at both? You're working at both of these places during COVID, or one, or?
So in the north, in the York region area, no, I was not working in that during COVID. I actually was still attached to the VAW shelter in York region up to just about the beginning of COVID, and at that point I gave up the position, since we were encouraged by our public health in Grey County not to travel outside of the area.
Right.
I was really doing it just to ensure that I maintain contact to that end, as opposed to that I needed to do it and then traveling. It's probably best to give it up at this time.
Yeah, well, no one really knew what was. It's not that it's any necessarily clear now, but particularly then, no one really knew what was going to happen, really.
Right.
Okay, well, that's great, and maybe if you could, why don't we move right into the policing part of it, since you've got such a sort of broad experience. And of course, we're interested in COVID in particular, but not just in that period. And maybe we could start with the women's shelters first. What is in that role? What was your main sort of contact with police? Because I imagine with that population, it's particularly complicated because of their often urgent need for security and safety. On the other hand, there must be factors that mitigate that. So I'm wondering, maybe we could start talking in terms of the VAW shelter. What was the sort of main points of contact there?
Usually, where the police is concerned, it was referrals. They may have been in attendance at a domestic violence, and they needed to remove the woman to a safe place.
Right.
So they would reach out to us to see whether or not we could accommodate them.
Right.
So usually that is the reason the police, our interaction with the police at the VAW level. But they do have other reasons when, of course, they're coming on site, or they're calling to see whether or not they can come on site to do an interview with a woman to follow up on the abuse or the incident that they had
Right. And what percentage of the referrals are we talking about in terms of people at the shelter? Half the time, half the women there are through referrals, or what amount?
I would think it's more than 50% are referrals, not necessarily from the police, but other agencies in the community.
Right.
So you would have referrals from CAS, you'll have referrals from addictions, from mental health support. So, and of course, there's always self-referrals, and always have friends and families telling their relatives or their friends that, based on the circumstances that you're currently living in or the conditions you're currently living in, it would be better for you to try and secure a space at the women's shelter and then move on from there.
Right.
So, yes, I would think I'll probably say a good 75% of our clients are referrals.
Right. So, in essence, this is a little simplistic, but they've been, in their decision to leave, they're sort of making themselves homeless in almost, obviously, in almost all the cases that you have.
Yes, so even though we don't consider VAW clients homeless clients, in actual fact, the fact that they had to leave their security of home and move into a shelter, they become homeless at that point. So it's a matter of trying to look into the future and see what housing referrals we can provide for them, or if they have alternatives. Of course, they can see if they can reach out while they're in the shelter, because sometimes families are willing to take them in, so they will reach out to their family and say, "Can I stay with you for a while?" Or it could be that they apply for priority status, and through the county, they are able to get priority status and go into housing, for government housing, much quicker than if they had just done it regularly. The social housing in York region is 7 to 8 years wait, but if you're on a priority list, it can be so much quicker sometimes, as little as a 6 months wait.
But normally 7 to 8 years wait.
That is correct, for social housing.
Right.
But priorities, that's the difference. If you are a VAW client and you have experienced abuse, you can get priority status, which allows you to go into government housing so much quicker.
Right. Okay. And so the status itself is extremely, your work in the shelter is extremely important in sort of the process of them,
Oh yes, definitely.
Trying to.
For a VAW client to get that status, it comes from a VAW shelter.
Right. And of course, the sort of horrific circumstances that many of the women are in and go through, severely limits their options when they leave, in terms of having someplace else to live. But I'm wondering if there are some women who are particularly vulnerable in that respect, or have a particularly minimal options as opposed to some who may have the resources or network that they don't have to go to a shelter but can do something else. Can you speak to that?
So you'll find that if you have immigrants or refugees coming into the country, they don't have any social support. So they may be alone in terms of no additional family around them. And in many instances, they may not be working, or they are just doing part-time work, and it's their partner that's actually going out and earning the major income. So where financial support is concerned, they rely on their partner for that. And they find it very difficult to leave a secure home where they don't have to think about who's going to pay the next month's rent, and go into, say, a VAW shelter, try and apply for social support, and then the income that they're now receiving cannot, or probably can just barely pay for a room as opposed to the home that they had previously. So they have all of these things to weigh, and yes, they're being abused by their partner, but they find that when they look at all the options, and the unknown is always very difficult for them to make that step towards, a lot of them stay in the relationship. Some come into the VAW shelter, but when they realize just what the future looks like, they realize that it's going to be so much harder than when they were with their husband or their partner. Then some of them decide to return home. It's unfortunate, but we find that a